Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight as we begin the process of redistricting our elementary and middle schools. My name is John Marshausen, and as the superintendent of the Dublin City Schools, I'm excited that we can start this process together. We've got a great group of people to take your questions and funnel them to the consultant, Matt Cropper with Cropper GIS Consulting, who will be assisting us with the redistricting process. First, let me begin by sharing that as we teach our students E plus R equals O, and we ask our students to press pause, to get their minds right, and to step up, this is a process that we will be using tonight and throughout our elementary and middle school redistricting journey. We are starting today, and in October, we will have a public event with the new elementary and middle school boundaries ready in December. For those of you who may be tuned in tonight to begin a conversation about high school redistricting, this is not about high school redistricting. High school redistricting will be a process that will begin in January of 2025, and we will not be having any conversations about that process until we get through this elementary and middle school process. We understand that redistricting at any level instills emotions, that we all care for our children and want what's best for our kids. As we go through this, please know that beginning in 2025, we're going to have 15 amazing elementary schools in the Dublin City School District. We have 5 outstanding middle schools. And for us, our goal is to make sure that we have our students distributed properly so that we have a balanced learning environment in all of our schools that will serve us for many years. Now, I know that there are some who would want a guarantee that this will be the only time their child would be redistricted. And I would be lying if I said we won't redistrict any of these kids again. We honestly don't know. The pace at which our district is growing and where our space will be available will dictate what happens in the future. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Matt Cropper. Matt with Cropper GIS is an expert in the field. This is what he does for a living. And I think it's awesome that we can bring in a consultant who can make sure that we have all of the right kids in the right place and can lead us through this process. So Matt, thanks for joining us. Thanks for partnering with us, and take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Marshausen, and thank you all for attending this webinar tonight. I am Matthew Cropper with Cropper GIS Consulting, and we are the consultants who are working with the district on this effort. Cropper GIS Consulting is a firm. We're based out of Ohio. We're actually not far from Dublin, but we have staff who work all over the United States. And our specialty is just this type of work, school redistricting. We do a lot of facility planning and that type of work, but we're here to focus on school redistricting effort for the Dublin City Schools. As Dr. Marshausen said, I am Matthew Cropper with Cropper GIS, and I have over 20 years experience in doing this for school districts across the United States, and honored to be working with you on this particular study. And I will be facilitating the work of our team as we move forward with this project. Just a little bit of background, some of the background of who we've worked with. This is just a little small list of some of the districts that we worked with in the local area, so close to Dublin. So we've worked with districts of all different sizes, and from 3,000 to 300,000 students. And so we bring a lot to the table on what has worked and what hasn't worked with other communities, and some of how they face different challenges as it relates to this kind of work. In addition to school district work, I also do work with the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Civil Rights. And since about 2007, I've provided expert consultation to them regarding federal desegregation cases and things like that. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about some school redistricting specific to Dublin City Schools. A little bit of background on the project and why we have to do this is that The district is growing, as you all know, and it's in the process of building a new elementary school. The new elementary school is called Bishop Elementary, and that's slated to open in the fall of 2025-26. So the primary focus of this is to build a zone for that new elementary school and provide relief to the schools that need it the most, which are the elementary schools in the northern part of your school district. So we're looking at creating a tenant zone for Bishop Elementary School for fall of 2025 to balance utilization and relieve overcrowding in existing schools, and also be proactive in giving schools as much space as we possibly can in anticipation for ongoing growth to occur. And also, while we do this work, we're also looking at middle schools to try to make sure that we have a clean feeder pattern or an efficient feeder pattern from elementary schools as students progress from elementary to middle school. And so we will be looking at middle schools as well in this district. But as Dr. Marshausen said, we're only focused on elementary schools and middle schools as part of this particular effort. High schools are not even being evaluated or looked at in this particular effort. So we were hired by the district to help facilitate this work, to develop materials and to help inform the public and get the public involved in this process and facilitate this process, empower the community with the ability to provide input so that you can see things that are being done, and also provide input and also give you some tools to be able to understand why maybe some of the zone lines may be changing one way or the other. Tonight's meeting is not to share any particular maps of the tenant's boundary options or anything. We are just giving you a background on the rationale for this and how you can participate and to mark your calendars for future efforts and for future meetings. We are, of course, leveraging our expertise as we do this kind of work on a daily basis for school districts across the United States, and then ultimately work to recommend a redistricting plan to the school board. As we do our work and as we start to evaluate attendance boundaries for schools and ultimately impacting communities and moving communities to accomplish our objectives, we're focused on a set of criteria. So these are, think of them as the rules to follow as we move a boundary line one way or another, or move one street or one community from one school to the other. And the best plan, when this is all said and done, will be the one that adheres to these criteria as a whole as best as possible. We can't focus only on one element of these criteria, because if we only focus on one part of these criteria, we start to deviate from the others. And these are criteria that are best practices that we use and that we see with school districts that are going through the same type of process across the United States. These are things such as balancing school facility utilization, making sure there's an adequate number of seats available in each school, but then also be a little bit proactive if possible. Where we know there's high growth areas, we may need to give them a little bit more space so that they can grow in to an efficient utilization. We're looking at studying the demographics of the schools and the student population, and being mindful of what the demographics are as we move lines, making sure that we are not making things less demographically diverse, and if at all possible, try to bolster the demographic diversity of schools as we do our work. Be focused on close proximity to try to assign students as close to their home as possible, knowing that these are small children, and the amount of time they spend on a bus, we want to keep that at a minimum. We try to get them as home as quick as possible, and assigning students as close to their home as possible tries to do that as best as possible. And along with that, maximizing bus efficiency. So having a good efficient zones will enable efficient bus transportation and also cost savings for the district. Try to make effort to establish contiguous zones. So this is basically not going into an established area and drawing an area, circling out a neighborhood or a subdivision or an apartment complex and taking that to a different school outside of their zone. We want to make sure that there's one zone per school as we do this work, and make it one contiguous zone per school. Be mindful of future growth, like I said. Establishing clear feeder patterns is an important part. So we want to make sure that we study what's the current elementary to middle school progression. What's the percentage of an elementary school that goes to middle school? If it's 100%, that's really the most ideal setting. But there are many cases that where an elementary school cannot always fit. Every elementary school cannot fit 100% into a middle school. If we have to split an elementary school, we want to be mindful of that percentage and make sure that it's a balanced split so that we don't have, say, 5% of an elementary school going to one middle school and 95% of the elementary going to another. Thinking again of these children making relationships with friends and things like that in elementary, and that when they get to the next level, they go to the middle school that they're assigned to with some familiar faces and some friends. And then as we draw the lines, try to use major roads whenever possible and feasible, and major geographic features and things like that, so that it can be easily understood. And also, trying to minimize the number of times students have to cross over streets and things like that goes along with that. Talking about some of the people who are stakeholders in this process. So we are the consultant. As I said, we're facilitating the work and conducting meetings and supporting the district and providing materials and using our expertise to guide the process. We have an internal planning team that consists of school district administrators, central office, transportation, and school principals are meeting with us to evaluate different components of the study. We've met with them several times to talk about logistics for redistricting and some of and leading up to this public information session. And the internal planning team we will be working with for the next couple months as we start to look at maps and options, and as we prepare for presenting an option, some maps to you in October. And the general public, you guys are a very important part of this process in providing input as the process matures, and invited to submit comments. So we do, and I'll share some ways for you to provide input right away, even before maps are shared. And I'll do that here later in the process. And then we will have a public information session where we will be live in person, and we will have that at Jerome High School in October. I'll talk about that in a minute, where we'll invite you to come look at maps and statistics, and we'll have a gallery walk format there for you to look at some maps and then give us input and have discussions around the maps. Ultimately, the school board's in charge of setting the parameters for us and giving us the direction as it relates to this. And the school board is involved in more of the high policy related decision-making things that are involved with this, but we don't have school board working with us in the internal planning team in making maps and things like that. Looking at our timeline, we've been working on this since May and preparing for tonight, and also ongoing preparations for October. So you could see we've been working through working through some baseline options, meeting with the internal planning team, putting data and information together, the webinar and some other tools that I'm going to share with you. And ultimately, the second public information session, like I said, is going to be at Jerome High School on October 21st. And that's going to be the key meeting where we will be sharing redistricting maps with you. And that's when you will first start to see things that are being considered for where students and where communities may be impacted and where they may move as a result of this study. After October 21st, we're going to be working back with the internal planning team, and there's going to be a survey that accompanies that October 21st session. And then we will be finalizing our recommendations and presenting to the board on December 9th. So the recommendations will be presented before the Christmas holiday, before the December holidays. And that is the timeline that we're working towards. I'm just going to give a little bit of background on our approach. And another thing I forgot to mention is that you'll notice in the webinar that there is a Q&A button on your taskbar. So you are welcome to post any questions that you want to in that Q&A. And when this session is complete, we will review some of those questions. And if we're not able to answer all questions that are posted in the Q&A, the school district has a really nice FAQ, frequently asked questions section on their redistricting page. And we will be posting, updating that if we do get a number of questions that we can't answer this evening. And also, I am streaming this presentation, and the presentation will be saved and recorded, and we'll be posting this also So anybody who could not participate in this webinar tonight will be able to benefit from this presentation. So back to the presentation, looking at 4 different key phases of our process. We collect information, we put information together, we develop some baseline materials and supporting resource materials for the public and also the internal planning team. And then we start working through options in a series of meetings with the stakeholders, with the district officials, and then also with you tonight and then in October. So as we collect data, we get information from the school district. We get data on enrollment, school capacity. We actually map out all the students in the district so we know where the students, how many students live on any street, and we can make efficient and accurate counts and estimates as we start to look at estimating enrollment for potential school zones. The city and the county has a really good set of data that we use for property lines, addressing information, subdivisions, road networks, all of that information we also collect from other sources. We put this information together as we collect it. And one of the key things that you'll see on the screen here is called planning blocks. And these are building blocks for redistricting. So you'll notice that, and I'll show you how you can see these here in a second, but you see on the screen, you see PB, one of the ones I see is PB 86. So that's planning block 86, and that has 5 elementary students living within that block. So this helps inform the internal planning team and also you as members of the public to understand how many kids live in different areas of our study area in our region. And then you can also understand, if you want, you can tell us as you provide feedback, I live at this planning block in this planning block number, and these are my thoughts. You may provide input related to planning blocks. Maybe a planning block may accidentally split the end of a street off or something like that we may have missed. That kind of information or input that we are welcome to, that we would like to hear from you, and encourage you to give us input. And a lot of communities align with the planning block numbers so that it helps us understand exactly where you're coming from and the area that you're focused on and what your comment is related to. And you can also do it by subdivision name and any other way as well. But the planning blocks are the building blocks for redistricting. We take every attendance area and we break them into smaller pieces and think of them as pieces of the puzzle that we look at. If an area moves, it moves together. So these are how the planning blocks are in play as we start to move areas from one to another as we develop options. This is our study area. So you can see everything that's in the colored on the map is our schools that could be impacted as part of the study. I would say that any student that lives within these areas could be impacted, although we will do our best to minimize the impact and try to move as few students as possible while we accomplish our objectives. So elementary schools that could be impacted as part of the study are Abraham Depp, Deer Run, Glacier Ridge, and Eli Penny. Middle schools that could be affected as part of this study are Eversole Run, Henry Carr, John Sells, and Willard Griselle Middle School. So these are the schools that are part of the study area. Anything that is not listed or that's not shown on the map with the coloring background are schools that are not in our study area and students and schools that would not be impacted as part of this study. We have an interactive map that we have developed to help inform you. And this is just right now, it shows current zones in those planning blocks. It's croppermap.com/DublinCity_OH. And this is something that can be used on any device. And as we start to develop options, and when we start sharing options with you, we will put options on here as well. And so you can type in your address in here and it'll zoom in on your area. It'll tell you where you go right now, your current school assignment. And then come October, it'll also show where you are in the option, and it'll give you a notification if you are or are not impacted. And this is this online map can be viewed on any device, phone or tablet or computer. This is just a screenshot of the interactive map. And I think when I get to the website and give you a little preview of the website, I'll show you a little bit of the interactive map here. but it's pretty self-explanatory and pretty user-friendly. And but I'll give you a little orientation on the online map once I get to that section here. We've developed a background report to help enable communication and make sure that the message is clear and that everybody is speaking the same language as it relates to some of the things that we're focused on. It helps to expand the knowledge of every stakeholder, and it just shares a consistent message so people don't have to speculate. If someone asks, what's the capacity of this school, you can go into the background report and find some information about what's the capacity of the school, what's the enrollment of the school, and other supporting information. We'll also have information in here that shows some maps that you could see some information about the planning blocks and for each school, and then other information about the enrollment. Timelines included in here in our overall process and criteria. All the information I'm sharing with you tonight is in this background report, which will also be posted on the website that we have dedicated for this process. So as we develop information and materials, we then get into the fourth phase of creating options. We're developing scenarios and working through options. And those are being worked on still in anticipation to share those with you in October. Internal planning team, like I said, I think I've covered this pretty well, but this is the group that we'll be working with and meeting with them to evaluate options and start working through and just getting any other input from them and insight from them as they work with your communities and your children at your school and things like that. The internal planning team will be is a critical part of our process. So this is our website. We have developed a website focused on this effort for everybody to be able to use as a resource to see information. It's sort of a one-stop shop for all things redistricting for Dublin City Schools. It's dcsredistricting.com. And on this site, we have a lot of these things that I talked about. And I'll go just show you just a quick thing, a quick preview of this page. So this is the website. And so as you could see, you have the background and objectives. There are links to the background report and the direct link to the district's website. The timeline. We also have a general feedback form on here where you could provide input right now at any time if you'd like. And that's just, this is the feedback form. You could type in your information, just give us general input as it relates to anything related to the process or anything at this point. There's no maps or options being shared yet. And so we don't have any insight onto how you may be impacted yet. That's coming on October 21st. But this is just a vehicle and a method for you to provide input right away if you'd like, or any questions at the end. You can provide questions. I think the expectation is we're not going to respond to every single respondent that submits on this form. But as we see questions come through, we will be monitoring those and updating the district's frequently asked questions, documents, and making sure that you are as informed as possible. This is your online map. And so you'll notice that as you zoom in, you start to see more detail. And as I go in more to the new school, zoom into this area, more roads start to pop up. You start to see parcel lines and property lines and things like that. You can click on the map and it'll tell you where you are now in terms of where your current assignment is. And then this will show you also where you are in the options when we start sharing those in October. You could also type in your address if you want to, and then it'll zoom to your address. And if you want to look at different information here, you can turn on the planning blocks. So there's a little plus sign that turns this on, and you can look at K5. So this shows you the K5 count within each planning block and the planning block number. And so you can see how each planning block populates the number of students within each planning block and so on and so forth. You could do middle school if you want, turn off K5, turn on 6 through 8. It'll tell you how many middle schoolers are in there if you're looking at middle schools. And you can also turn on the middle school boundaries. So we have the middle school boundaries as well that you can view and see the geography that we're working with and work as we start to evaluate the district. And so these planning blocks, I would say, are not set in stone. If there are adjustments that should be made, if, for example, we're splitting a neighborhood or something like that with some of these planning blocks, we may be able to make adjustments. Some neighborhoods are very large, so we do need to have the planning blocks be small enough so that we have some flexibility in developing options. But these can be viewed on the online interactive map. And we also show high school boundaries. Like I said, high schools are not part of this, but we have them shown in here just for your information and just for your benefit. So let me go back to the presentation. So like I had talked about the general feedback form on the website, you have access to that general feedback form. And that is the way that we're hoping that you provide input as it sits now. Once we get to October, we are going to have a survey that accompanies the public information session on October 21st, and we'll have some more directed questions as it relates to the criteria. So that's going to kick off in October. And I would just ask that if you have any questions or thoughts or considerations, put those on the feedback form. And that's something that we will be monitoring and sharing with the internal planning team and the different stakeholders. Another opportunity to provide input after October 21st is attend the board education work session on October 28th, where this topic will be discussed as well at that particular meeting. So next steps are we're going to be continuing our work with the internal planning team and working and preparing some maps and some options to share with you on October 21st. That is the key date that I would tell you to mark your calendars for at Jerome High School Center for the Performing Arts. That will be at 7 p.m. On October 21st, and that's where we will be sharing maps with you. And then the final recommendations will be presented to the board on December 9th, 2024. So that is all I have. And let's see if there are any questions that have come through. I do see that we have had some questions, and let me go ahead and answer a few of these. So one question is, will students have the option to remain at their current elementary or middle school until they transition to the next division, middle school or high school level? For example, if my child is in second grade but is rezoned, can she remain in the same elementary school through and including fifth grade? The district email said high school students are allowed to do that from what I read. Also, could younger siblings use the same middle school their older sibling used before rezoning occurred? So the answer to that is there will be no option for students to remain at their current school. There will be not be capacity for students to remain at that school. So if your household or your community is affected and move to a different school, they will be expected to attend the newly assigned school, regardless of what grade level they are in. Another question is, if Ohio changes to school choice, would families in that zone have first choice to enroll their children before people zoned for another school use lottery for their seats? If Ohio moves to school choice, wouldn't it make sense to spend more money on schools in a higher demand? So the answer is we will not be making decisions based on potential changes to Ohio law, only current law and Board of Education policy. Another question is, Union County members of Dublin tried to vote down the levy. Why are they the beneficiaries of passing the levy? Dublin City Schools spreads over 3 counties, 7 municipalities, and 6 townships. All voters have a voice. With the passage of the levy, the new school needed to be built in a high-growth area where district already owned land. Another question, are children's mental health being considered in this analysis? And children's mental health is always a priority. We will continue to support all the students regardless of their needs. And so, yes, it is a priority, and we will continue to support all of the students regardless of their needs, as the school district will. A question about why is the chat closed to the community and why are you cherry picking questions? The choose to do this over Zoom. And no, that's not the case. All questions are being monitored, and will be addressed. Since there are some similar, we'll be answer multiple questions at once. And if we run out of time, we will be posting the answers to questions online. So it's the best method to field questions, and so that's the way it's being done in this particular webinar. Will things already be finalized at that point when the public is invited to view maps? So maps will be shared on October 21st in a public meeting. Nothing will be finalized until December when the recommendations are presented to the Board of Education. Why was a redistricting plan done when Eversole Middle School opened, not done with longevity in mind? Impacting families more than once in this short period of time could have been avoided. And the answer, middle school growth has been rapid in some areas and has lowered in others, leading to the need to balance the middle school enrollment at schools, as well as look at feeder pattern impacts, as I mentioned. So let's see. So let's see, another question. What are the chances of proposal on October being approved by the board as is? And the board does not approve the proposal. The superintendent makes the final decision after reviewing all input. And so that final decision will be made in December by the superintendent. Okay. And there is another comment question. Thank you for doing this. It's likely that my children will be moved from Glacier Ridge to Glacier Ridge from Depp. We live in Jerome Township, and the kids would now be potentially riding bikes to Dublin proper. The only current way to bike in that direction is take a long path through Glacier Ridge Metro Park. Is there any consideration given to creating bike paths between these two areas that are a bit more direct, such as creating a bike path on Highland Croy South? I'm not sure. We are not really sure what the maps are yet. And so we don't want to make assumptions on where any area is going to go yet. And we can't predict bike paths. And so bike and walking paths are a decision of the city, township, and county. And Dublin does a really good job of managing the connectivity of all the communities and things like that. And so I imagine that if it becomes an issue, they will do everything they can to make sure that they accommodate the citizens of Dublin to the best of their ability. So a lot of questions coming in here. So one question: future levies will be rejected if you screw this up. How do you plan to respect the community's opinions? So we in the district will take all the feedback and suggestions seriously and redistrict. Really, what we are doing is trying to make a plan that accomplishes and adheres to our objectives as best as possible, moves as few students as possible while accomplishing our objectives, and being mindful of what's best for all children in this entire area, and not just one student or one neighborhood or one school community, but we're focused on what's best for all children in the entire district and the entire study area as we work through a redistricting plan. I think should be understood that there are people who are going to be unhappy because people are going to be moving as part of this process. And just know that we're mindful of that and we're compassionate to those concerns, but we have to do the job and we have to do it right, and we have to accomplish our objectives, even if it does move communities and families, and knowing that there will be people who are unhappy with the results. Okay, on the district site, it mentions schools that will likely be affected by redistricting, and I heard you say it will mainly affect the north. However, if you're also trying to balance school facility utilization, won't most schools be involved in redistricting? So there's a lot of I mentioned the north because the new elementary school is going up in the northern part of the district, and so that's where you see the elementary schools that are the focus of this, trying to minimize the impact. And so those areas are the elementary schools that we're looking at that would be the most impacted or that could be affected. Middle schools do span further south because they cross over a larger area. And as we try to achieve balance of feeder patterns, we will be looking at middle schools that go a little bit further south. Let's see. So there are several options moving forward. Who will be deciding which option is the best for the community? Will the public have any say? I think the public will have say. We are garnering your input and listening to what you have to say, and especially when we get to options in October, that will be a critical point. And ultimately, the decision is up to the superintendent, but all this information and input will be collected and will be considered as we work towards a recommendation for the district. You identified several schools included in the study that will be impacted. Could children of those schools be moved to other schools that were not identified as being impacted? Let's see here. Only students at the schools listed are affected. So those students in other school communities and that are not part of the study area will not be affected as part of this study. How are you forecasting future growth in communities? It's safe to assume you're familiar with the previous underestimation of growth in the northwestern part of the district. So we do have enrollment projection information from the district, and we are looking at ongoing growth activity and tracking that. We are doing the best we can with the available space that the district has to work with to be as proactive as possible, so that we don't end up with an overcrowding situation right when a school opens. So we are tracking and monitoring growth, but that growth will be and we're managing that as best as we can and being as proactive as possible. Does the Cropper Map website show the location of the new Bishop Elementary School? Yes, it does. It shows as new ES on the map right now. So you could see that on the site. You'll see the new elementary school point located on the map there. Although there's no zone for it yet, that the options for redistricting will be shared in October as we work to presenting maps for your input and consideration. Where is a link to the map with planning blocks? Don't see it on the redistricting site. So if you go to the redistricting site, you could see the online interactive map. If you scroll down, you'll see the interactive map and you can pull up planning blocks there. Or if you look at the background report, you can see maps of schools that show the planning block maps. And if you still have an issue seeing that, you could also reach out to us, and we'll make sure that you understand that you can find it and that you can benefit from that. Okay, so we'll keep going. We have some more questions here. Are you using current elementary school population to project future enrollment in middle schools as you map out boundaries to try and think ahead of enrollment in those schools? I think we're looking at projected enrollment data. We are looking at things such as how big the incoming grade levels look as we work through this. But as we estimate enrollment for the 4 schools, and when we start estimating enrollment for options, we'll be looking at it'll be based off of where the students are now, and we'll be as proactive as possible to give schools space if the school shows growth, or we could maybe give more students to a school if growth is not forecasted and actually showing stability or decline. You indicate it's important for elementary schools to be feeders for middle school. Is middle school feeding into the same high school criteria for middle school redistricting? We are looking at the impact of middle schools to high schools. As we look at middle schools, we will be reporting the percentage of split from middle to high school. although we will not be making any changes to high school zones, we could potentially be affecting the percentage of a middle school that feeds into a high school as we work through that. So we will be reporting the middle school to high school feeder pattern splits as we work through this effort. Let's see. We noticed on Realtor.com that the assigned elementary school for our house and neighborhood has already changed from Abraham Depth to Glacier Ridge. You said there will be a feedback period after the first redistricting draft has been proposed. However, it seems like the decision to redistrict certain neighborhoods has already been finalized. How will be utilizing public input to inform your proposed plan? Well, I can guarantee you that whatever's on Realtor.com has not been vetted or approved or considered by the school district or us. I'm not sure what information is being posted on there, but no maps have been finalized or shared yet that show potential boundaries for the new school and subsequent redistricting. So that I would not lean or rely on any information from Realtor.com that says that an attendance area has changed. That really is not relevant and not accurate for the current state. You will see maps on October 21st, and then nothing's finalized until that December 9th board date when the recommendation is made to the school board. How much weight does public input carry? It sounds like primarily a GIS data process with little room for community input. By October 21, maps will already be created. So we do this work all the time and across the country, and we understand that when you get into this, it elicits an emotional response. So there's a lot of emotion that comes along with this, and our job is to make sure that we're mindful of the emotion, but make data-driven decisions. And so we are focusing on those objectives and criteria as we evaluate moving lines. Public input is very important, though, because if you give us input, I would say it's most important to provide input as it relates to those criteria. So that's because that's the lens that we are looking at this through. So if there is something that should be considered, or something that should be considered that helps us better adhere to the overall criteria for this project, then that's the input, the constructive input that we will be using and be able to leverage in potentially making a change. Like if we're splitting at the end of a street somewhere, or if something with the planning block maybe needs to be adjusted, or when we start to share options, if there's something that could be considered that helps us better align with the criteria, that's the most constructive input that we can get. The more emotional input, like I bought my house to go to this school, or my children that have graduated went to this school, or my grandparents went to this school. That kind of information is not stuff that we can really utilize or leverage. It's something that we're mindful of and compassionate to, but it's not something that we can make use of and to drive a change to the boundaries. How will the areas that are not yet developed be accounted for? So we are looking at that as well, and we will be tracking where subdivisions are being stretched and expanded to, and things like that, as with the focus on trying to be as proactive as possible as we develop a recommendation, so these boundaries can hold as long as possible. If my house zoning changed 3 years ago, will it be counted? I think that any area that is impacted as part of this process will be affected if they are impacted and moved to a different school. And like we said at the beginning, this will only be for elementary and middle schools. There will not be any changes to high schools as part of this process. And just the focus of this is elementary and middle school adjustments. And our neighborhood has been redistricted every year for the last 3 years. Will this be taken into consideration? I think that goes along with the last question. It will certainly be something that we will look at. Areas that have been impacted a lot in the past few years, we try to do our best to minimize the impact on communities and students as we work through this, and we'll do everything we can to minimize that impact. Although we should understand that anybody in an area that we're focusing on could be impacted as part of this process. There's a list of factors in the decisions on the website. Are these factors listed in order of priority? If not, what is the order of priority? And I said it in my presentation. Criteria are not listed in priority order. If there is one that takes a little bit higher weight, it's the balancing utilization and being mindful for future growth. That is something that all is an objective and a criteria. So the utilization piece is really a key element to both objectives and criteria. The other criteria are all weighted equally, and the best plan will be one that adheres to that criteria as a whole as best as possible. A Deer Run Elementary is not at capacity. Why should these kids be moved? Well, often as we start to work through this, first off, we don't know who's going to be moved. We haven't identified who is being impacted. Although in this area with building a new elementary school, there are communities and students going to be impacted. But sometimes as we build a zone for a new school and provide relief to others, there's what we call domino effect. And so in order to balance utilization, sometimes students have to be moved from one school to another in order for students to be able to move from another school to another. And so it's a complicated process, but sometimes we have to move areas from one school to another, and maybe not even the new school, in order to balance the utilization and adhere to our criteria as best as possible. How much are you being paid by the superintendent? We're being paid by the school district and contracted to do this. And I don't know the contract amount, but I think that's something you could probably find online. And so that I don't have an answer for. Could you post the websites you mentioned? Yes. Let me go back. So dcsredistricting.com is the key website. That's the web page that I would guide anybody to that has information. And at that dcsredistricting.com, you can get access to the feedback form, to the online interactive map, which you'll see web. It says web map. You click on that, and that'll take you to the online map, and then the feedback form. And also, I will put a recording of this video on the site as well as our PowerPoint presentation. And as we get to October, when we get to that date, we'll add another section for that as well, and keep updating this as the process matures. Why would you not consider the middle schools and high schools when reviewing redistricting, as it would be a complete comprehensive plan? I think the district is wanting to keep this minimal impact as possible. The real focus of this effort is to build a new zone for the new elementary school and provide relief to elementary schools in that area, and then also look at feeder pattern alignment. And so trying to minimize the impact as part of this process. So middle school, we're trying not to make substantial middle school adjustments if at all possible. The focus is elementary. And like I said, high school redistricting will be for a later conversation, not something that's being considered as part of this particular effort. And so will the meeting on October 21st have a virtual option or only in person? And so that October 21st meeting, it's going to be in person, but we may record a copy of that. It may be recorded on at the meeting site. And so we will make sure that we look at that and give you an option to have something to look at and to see what's being presented if you cannot make the meeting on October 21st. My children attend elementary middle schools, which have a big bike to school population. Will bikeability be to the schools be taken into consideration. I think it's certainly something. Walkability, bikeability is something that we will like to bolster and enable if at all possible. And so it definitely is something that will be considered if at all possible. Will Riviera community be split? Kids have a lot of friends in the neighborhood. It'd be good to keep the community together. And so this is something that I mentioned earlier. We don't know yet where the lines are going to go in the option. And some of these communities in Dublin are very large, and there's a lot of kids, hundreds of kids in some of these neighborhoods in multiple phases. So we know what the phases are and where the communities are, and we'll do our best to maintain community dynamics as we do this. If we have to split an area, we'll do our best to make it be a logical and efficient split, and something that's not too impactful, and try not to draw the line down the middle of residential streets or draw the line down side lots of yards and things like that. But we are compassionate and mindful of communities, and try not to split neighborhoods if at all possible. And are 2 new neighborhoods being built out, construction in underway near mine. How will this be considered? So we know what's being built, what's planned. And this goes back to my comment about being proactive as possible and trying to give as much space to schools that have some of the greatest residential activity going on right now, so that these can hold as far as possible. And that goes in line with other things in open land and things like that. So there are questions about open land and things like that. I think I've touched on those. So will the staff be shuffled? I don't see. I'm getting input from the IPT as well as I provide my responses, but I don't know. I don't know if staff is going to be shuffled or not, or there's going to be any impact. I think with the new school being built, they will be looking at staffing, and it's very possible that, in my experience, that staff does. The staffing is a consideration the school district has to focus on as they work to right size the buildings with the new population that they're going to be serving. Will Dr. John be holding any kind of Q&A between the October feedback session and the proposal being sent to the board in December, or is all feedback only being taken through the form and to you guys as the company taking this on? There is a form available on our website, and that form is shared with Dr. John as well as the internal planning team. And so that's the method that we suggest you provide input, that everybody can see, nothing falls through the cracks, and all that input is stored and registered, and we take that and share that with everybody, and they will be reviewing your feedback as well as us as we work through this process. Website link, again, I have that on my webpage here. I have it posted on my screen. It's dcsredistricting.com as well. And these materials will be posted online as well, and we will post those. They'll probably show up tomorrow, I would imagine, the recording for tonight in this PowerPoint presentation. The fact that we are having to redistrict again after such a short time would suggest that the previous consultants and district leaders failed. Why should we trust you to get it right this time? Well, I would say that it's very hard to manage student assignment in an area that's growing as much as Dublin is. I think that it's something that we, as well as in prior efforts, I'm sure they did everything they could to try to be as proactive as possible and to try to enable these for as long as they possibly hold, as long as they can. But with the nature of the area and the community that you guys live in, there's a lot of growth going on. And so we just do everything we can to be as proactive as possible to let these hold as long as they possibly can, knowing that this probably is not going to solve all of the overcrowding challenges that this district is facing or will face in the future, and that we'll do everything we can to leverage the space that you have available and to hold as long as possible. But as growth continues, the district will have to continue to manage the growth and to make sure that they accommodate students that are moving into this district. Location address of the new elementary school. I think that's something that is posted on the district's webpage. So that new elementary school, if that's not on there, we will add that to the FAQ. And I'm gonna do a couple more questions, and then we will look at evaluate the rest of these. There's common threads. We'll put them in an FAQ and continue to keep an eye. We really appreciate your input as and your questions as they go, as this continues. With the high school redistricting being implemented in 2026, will the feeder pattern study take into consideration elementary and middle to 226 high school boundaries? I don't know. We have not. High school redistricting is nowhere being considered or discussed from my shop yet. So we haven't really looked at high school redistricting or thought about logistics for the high school redistricting. Although as we work, if we do that, and as we work through a high school plan in the future, we will be looking at a lot of similar things as we do with this study as it relates to the criteria and feeder patterns and things like that. And so the high schools are a lot of questions happening, but high schools are not part of this study. And I would just say, stay tuned for any discussion about high school. Not something that I am working on at the moment or prepared to answer any questions about high school. I'm confused why Bailey Elementary will not be affected since it's currently a feeder to Grizel. And so I think that the study area has been identified, and those schools are the elementary schools that we've listed are the ones that could be affected, trying to keep the impact down. Although it could, the percentage of feeding students that feed from elementary to middle may be something that's affected. And I know people joined a little bit late. I will be posting asking about the purpose and objectives. This presentation will be posted online. So if you look, you could follow this tomorrow and see a copy of the presentation and catch up on anything you may have missed if you came late to the meeting. Will public input be taken during the October 21st meeting? Or do we have options available after the event to provide feedback, especially for those who cannot attend the event in person? So that October 21st meeting is typically more of like a gallery walk format. We'll go over the objectives and the criteria like I did tonight, and I'll give you an overview of the maps that have been drafted. And then we'll have maps out on easels for you to go look at and have discussions with the internal planning team and consultants and staff about those maps. And there will be a survey that accompanies that. There may be a Q&A session on the 21st, but usually we don't have a Q&A session for those. It's more of just a gallery walk format to have this one-on-one discussions, but then a survey to collect all of your input for everyone's benefit. I don't know what firm completed the previous studies. Another question. Could a kid from an elementary school that's identified as impacted move to a school identified as not being impacted? I believe that I think that the only way that you can do that is if you move to an area where that student may be zoned to a different school. Elementary students are only going to be redistributed between Depp, Glacier Ridge, Penny, Deer Run, and Bishop Elementary. The other schools are not part of this. And so any student who's impacted that lives in this area that's reassigned will have to go to the new school regardless of what their grade level is. So I think there are more questions, and I don't think we're going to be able to answer all of these questions, but these questions we will take them and review all of these and look, and I will work with the district to provide a frequently asked question to upgrade that, update that with some of these questions that are being asked. And so I think that's about all we have. It's 8 o'clock. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to working with you and seeing you on October 21st at Jerome High School. Look for more communication from the school district as it relates to this effort, and any information that we have able to share will be sent to the families of these areas to make sure that you are as informed as possible with this effort. So with that said, I think that we're going to conclude the webinar, and thank you again, and look forward to working with you and seeing you in the upcoming months. Have a good night.